Почитувани гледачи, добро вечер во уште едно издание на емисијата Заспиј ако можеш. Овој пат разговараме со еден човек кој што е крајно објективен, се разбира, кој што ги познава одлично работите, шефот, председавачот со Европската иницијатива за стабилност Гералд Кнаус, со кој што ќе поразговараме малку околу проспектите на европското проширување со нови членки, тоа што за нас е најважно, се разбира. Ја опрашаме и за стојбите во регионот, па и на целиот континент, може би некоја глобална тема. Се разбира, разговорот ќе го водам на англиски јазик, а вие ќе добиете титул на целиот разговор, се разбира. Mr. Klaus, welcome to our show, Sleep If You Can on Alpha Television.
Yes, hello. I'm always happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So, we would like to know everything about the processes in the EU, especially the enlargement process, and we're going to start with the situation regarding Macedonia. Of course, we have received the annual progress report 3 weeks already ago, so it was a big disappointment for majority of the public, including the NGO sector. You are coming from NGO sector, and you know how important this part of the society is for us. What mistake has been done in the last year? Why we got 10 zeros and 10 very bad estimations by European Union, European Commission?
Well, I would like to go back a few years to 2019, when North Macedonia had just done everything right. You know, you had a reform government, you had been able to join NATO, you had found a compromise with Greece. Everything was set for North Macedonia to start accession talks. And in the past, for Romania, for Lithuania, for Slovakia, for Bulgaria, accession talks lasted between 3 years and 5 years. So let's say North Macedonia, which has been a candidate for a long time, would take 4 years. So in 2019, you were ready. If there would have been a start, then by 2023, by the end of this year, you would be about to join the EU. And I think at that time there was a lot of energy. You know, the thing is that if the process is credible, it attracts people who have the expertise, who have the energy, who see the opportunity. I've seen this in every single country: Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, everywhere. But it didn't happen. You were blocked for stupid reasons that had nothing to do with what your government at the time was doing. And then you were blocked again. And I remember my colleagues and myself, we wrote at that time, we said, you know, this is not going to pass. This is not a temporary problem. It's a problem of the way the European Union thinks about enlargement. And it's not about North Macedonia. It's going to be a problem for every candidate.
Maybe it's good to remind our viewers that in 2019, France was the country.
France was. I mean, after...
Yes. And then Bulgaria.
After all these years of a Greek veto, then it was a French veto.
After we changed our constitution and we changed our name officially.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And then it became the Bulgarian veto. And so let me just, you talked about 2023, the progress reports. Let me just say this. Every single Balkan country is stuck. Everyone. You know, you are stuck. You're not negotiating. You're not opening any chapters. But Montenegro is stuck. And it's been negotiating for 11 years. Albania is stuck. And we might see even a Greek veto to open any chapter. Kosovo is stuck. It applied for accession. And in the last report, there is not a word about its application. You know, literally, it's just ignored. Bosnia is, of course, stuck. And Serbia is not only stuck, but going backwards. So we have a region that is every single country in the last 4 years not a single chapter was opened anywhere, nor closed. You're just stuck. And that's a process. And we have said in 2019 that we need to see the reality and find a way to get around this. And just today, I was talking to ministers in the government in Kiev, in Ukraine, which, with the war, sees European integration as their only survival strategy. They need to win the war, but they need a future to fight for something. So they say we are fighting that after the war, we will be part of a prosperous, democratic European Union. And they did everything right in terms of reaching out, making reforms, public relations, going to parliaments. And what is happening now? They will be blocked too. So I talked to these ministers and I said, listen, the problem is that the current accession process will not work for anyone. We've seen it in the last 10 years in the Balkans. We see it now with Moldova and Ukraine. So we need accession. The vision is the right one. It's the best vision to join the richest, biggest market of democracies in the world. But we can't pretend that the way it is now being handled will work. So we need new ideas. And we made ideas 3 years ago. And a lot of people said, oh no, we prefer the old way. Let's just keep putting our head against the wall. 4 years have passed. And where is North Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Bosnia? They are completely stuck. So I think there is a really important lesson. And to keep banging your head against the wall as a country in the Balkans is not going to make the wall go away.
But Gerald, I understand we need a new approach, we need a new strategy, but you are very well aware of what's going on in the minds of us, journalists, the ordinary citizens, people in the administration. I have made the first interview with you 2010, I think, in Skopje, in Holiday Inn Hotel. I'm afraid that I'm going to retire and I'm not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of European Union. And
yes, and that needs to change. And I mean, listen, now let's talk seriously about what one can do. And so, I'm not an academic. We are an activist think tank. We are doing serious analysis, but then we are trying to change things, propose ideas for change to policymakers. So let me give you an idea for the next week, for the next days. The government of Albania, the government of Moldova, the government of North Macedonia, and the government of Ukraine, 2 NATO members, North Macedonia and Albania, and 2 candidates with a lot of respect, with very pro-European governments, with leaders that everyone in Europe respects. If they come together and say to the European Union, listen, stop playing games. If you are not ready for full new members at the moment, and you hide it because you say, oh, we first need to reform ourselves. But nobody in the Union has an agreement on what the reforms should be. It's an excuse. The French have one vision, the Germans another, the Poles another, the Baltics another, the Czechs another. Tell them, listen, we need to be in the Union so that we can have the same economic success as Romania. Romania is now per capita wealthier than 5 other EU member states. It's overtaken Greece, right? We need to be in the Union so that war becomes unthinkable. That like it's unthinkable between Lithuania and Poland, or Germany and the Netherlands, or Italy and Austria, or Hungary and Romania. We need to be in. We know you cannot now let us in as full members, but you have a huge advantage if we join the single market. And we could do that in 3 or 4 years. But just tell us now, if we meet the conditions and you help us, we can become part of your single market with the 4 freedoms, like Norway, like Iceland, like Austria and Finland and Sweden did. They first joined the single market and then they joined the EU. Now, if those 4 governments write to the EU together call the French, the Germans, the Baltics, each of them has different friends, and say, listen, stop playing games. Give this to everyone in the Balkans and Ukraine and Moldova a chance. And then Mr. Vucic, who also wants this, he said it many times, he should then call Orban. Tell the Hungarians, listen, I want this too. This could work. Make the European Council in December, ideally, it's not much time. On the weekend, there'll be the next meeting of the diplomats in Brussels. Next week, the foreign ministers will meet, and then there is the summit. Put a line in the summit that each country from the Balkans, Ukraine and Moldova, that meets the conditions can join the single market and enjoy the 4 freedoms, which means for your viewers, it's like living in the European Union. And then, of course, we also need, in the next EU budget, the money, the funding, the cohesion, the support. Once we are in the single market, we need the same support that other members of the single market get. So push for this now. But you know what I heard? I heard that European politicians are asking your politicians, what do you think of this idea? And they are saying, no, we don't want that.
That was officially proclaimed.
Yeah. And so for 4 years, the argument in Skopje was, we have a better strategy. And that better strategy, it's not the fault of your government. It's true everywhere. But that better strategy is not working. Because it's not a better strategy. It's a strategy based on misunderstanding the European Union. It will not work.
I agree with this mechanism for pressure, but there is a danger, a real danger, that the governments in various member states will say, fine, if you don't want this, then it's your problem. Then we are not anymore responsible for you. And then the whole system will collapse, because, our democracies in the whole region, not only Macedonia, has been built on the prospects for European membership. And yes. Now...
Well, I would go one step further. I don't like being dramatic and crying wolf, saying there is a threat around the corner and there is none. That's never good. But let's just be very realistic. Let's have a look at the map of Europe. So you have the European Union. And inside the European Union, you have Norway and Switzerland and Iceland, which are basically like inside. Switzerland is in Schengen, Norway is in the single market. But around this common area, around this integrated market, you have Russia, worse than ever, waging a war in Ukraine, the biggest, deadliest war in Europe since the 40s. Belarus, with most political prisoners since this state exists. You have fighting in the Caucasus with big ethnic cleansing of Armenians from Karabakh and the risk of a new war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You have fighting, of course, in the Middle East. You have the war still ongoing in Syria, Gaza, Israel. You have dictatorships in Tunisia, in Egypt, everywhere around this European integrated market. You have chaos, repression, and war. And this will spread. And the reason integration is the right strategy is because then you are in you have basically 2 Europes. A Europe in which young men must think that one day they will fight a war, and another Europe where young men in some way, optimistically, think they'll never have to fight a war. And the Balkans is the region in between. You had 10 years in which there were 4 wars. Then you had 2 decades, largely peace. But the region is not integrated. It could go this way or that way. And what I saw in the last year in Belgrade, in the football stadiums, when the army will go back to Kosovo, the slogans, the tanks. When I read Serbian newspapers, Informa, other tabloids, the mass media, and when I listen to politicians, they are talking about war. They are talking about, we need to defend ourselves. There are pogroms in Kosovo. There are no pogroms in Kosovo. These are lies. They are excuses to prepare for war. We are hearing Milorad Dodik in Bosnia saying that the day Donald Trump is elected, this could be November next year, he will declare independence of Republika Srpska.
And still, no one in Brussels, in Paris, in Berlin.
They don't see it.
They don't see it. They see it, but they're staying aside. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, she visited Belgrade recently. She said very good words about Serbia and the prospects for EU. And it still reminds me to Thessaloniki Agenda 2003. So many other summits where we're always promised we're going to be very soon according to merit system, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it doesn't function. I would like to know from you, you have been in contact with our Vice Prime Minister for Euro integration, Bojan Maricic. He was part of your SE, let's say, summer school or activities events. Why? I believe he knows everything about it. He knows majority of what you are talking to me now. Why he's still pressuring that 2030 is a time when we're gonna enter EU? Everybody knows this is not possible, and he's still pushing. Not only him, the Prime Minister also. I understand political propaganda. Fine, they have to give hope to the citizens. Fine, but in reality, I know some of it. You know all of it. This is not possible.
Well, listen. I mean, I'm reluctant to get into domestic politics in Skopje.
Generally, not about Skopje.
My recommendation would be that the people you mentioned, Bojan and others, I believe they really honestly believe in the European integration of North Macedonia. As I know, your previous leaders did, Zaev and Nikola Dimitrov and Shekarinska, and they believe in it. But the point
I
is,
believe
you believe in it. But now we need a strategy that works. So if there would be an agreement now, if the parliament in North Macedonia would pass a resolution instead of being divided and say, listen, we want to join the single market. On the way to the EU, we will not give up the goal. Our goal is full membership, but we want to join the single market in a merit-based process. And we are making a joint campaign just with the other two NATO allies, Montenegro and Albania. And we just go and demand this. We make the arguments. It's not a gift. It's in the interest. We need to do the reforms, but then we have real benefits because this is a credible signal for investors. And then we need the support. I think this is the way forward. Let me tell you also about the Bulgaria situation. Because when we wrote about this, the elephant in the room, we wrote a newsletter. Yes. We said the way this Bulgaria situation, this compromise that the EU tried to reach cannot work. And it's not the fault of the opposition in Skopje. It cannot work because what Bulgaria was asking for is impossible to do. It was very clear, and you can follow the news in Bulgaria. I lived in Bulgaria. I wrote a book about Bulgaria.
I know.
And I know from the Bulgarian experience when some leaders in Bulgaria say, please recognize a minority in North Macedonia. What they have in mind is not a few thousand people. What they have in mind is half your population. They say everybody who gets a Bulgarian passport, and that means the longer you are outside of the EU, the more people will get a Bulgarian passport. All of them are Bulgarians. And so the moment you make this concession, you will end up not in the EU, but with a new internal conflict with Bulgaria saying, actually, now that you have 20%, 30% Bulgarians, how about Bulgarian language in schools? How about Bulgarian, how about our history books? You will have a stupid debate on identity in a way that no European country should be forced by a neighbor to have it. So this was clear to us 3 years ago. And we see it now. So what's the solution? The solution can only be to say, listen, we're not going to give in to blackmail. We won't do this, but we're also not stubborn. We have no problem with a Bulgarian minority as long as it cannot be used to blackmail us. We put it in the constitution, and the moment we join the EU, this enters into force.
Now you're in danger to be declared as a pro-Russian force, to be declared as a paid by the opposition, because this is the narrative that majority of the population are using, and it's very good that you have explained it, how it looks like from, I don't know, Vienna, Brussels, or Berlin, where you are most of the time. Here, all of us who speaks about this scenario, as you said, just are proclaimed like pro-Russian.
I've lived in Ukraine. I'm doing everything to support Ukraine because I believe Ukrainian democracy is defending all of Europe. You know, I've been declared an enemy by Orban in the Hungarian media. You know, I'm the least pro-Russian person you can imagine. And I'm a big friend of Bulgaria. I've lived there for 2 years. I've been teaching there. I like Bulgaria. I was fighting for Bulgarian visa liberalization and Bulgarian accession in the EU. But let's just be objective. Any attempt to impose identity issues as part of the EU accession process is bound to fail. Because people in the end, you know, and this was my advice to the government in Skopje also, you know, it's not about making a technical concession. It's about opening a Pandora's box. And the European Union made a mistake, but it was told by people in Skopje to please help us by finding this compromise, and it didn't work. So let's recognize this. You can change it again. You can say now, and that would be my advice, we will change the constitution the moment we join the EU. And on the History Commission, we love it to have a History Commission with Bulgaria, but there must be 1/3 of the historians should be non-Macedonians, non-Bulgarians, and this History Commission is purely scientific and cannot impose anything. It's just about proposing among historians, you know, having debates. This is a good thing. Germany has this with France and Poland and the Czech Republic. But the idea that history becomes an issue in the accession process, you know, shut this idea down. And for this, you need a broad consensus in your parliament. And the sooner you do this, the more likely you get out of this trap.
Well, I believe these suggestions you're providing now are acceptable for most of the parties in the parliament. I don't see any problems, but in reality, I don't see possibility that the government will unite itself with the opposition, let's say, and to promote these new approaches you're suggesting, because they already are deep into the hole with the Bulgarian issue, so to speak. It's too late. It's too late now. They're still talking about.
It's never too late to get out of a hole that, you know, it's not your fault. This was really. I remember the pressure that was put on your government. It was deeply unfair, and people, you know, perhaps it was even, you know, your government tried, but it didn't work. So there's no point continuing something that doesn't work. And I think what is really important is to self-confidently, you know, what is it that North Macedonia contributes to the EU? I mean, let's just put that also. You are one of the most diverse countries in Europe. Lots of languages, lots of ethnicities, you know, different religions. I remember this symbol that you had once with the many stars, you know, saying that the sun also is a star, highlighting how diverse North Macedonia was. And at the same time, this diversity, with all the pressures, overall, you know, you've maintained a democracy. It's worked. You've just not been successful in developing like Romania or Lithuania because you were isolated. You were not part of the same integration process. For the European Union to have diverse countries like North Macedonia, with all these minorities, with the tradition of tolerance and cooperation, successful, you know, this is the model we need in the world today. The European Union should be making a huge effort that, and it's not just you, Montenegro is similar. You know, Albania with all the different religions, they're all Albanians, but all the different, you know, ethnicities, and I mean, all the different religions, Orthodox, Catholic, Islam.
And some Greek mayor.
Bosnia.
And some Greek mayor in prison.
And some Greek mayor, yes, I know. Famous Greek mayor. If you get, if the Balkans with this diversity is a success story, you know, it's a signal to the world beyond Europe. You know, look at the Middle East. I lived in Bosnia for 4 years. I saw in Bosnia villages where there was Hamas-style atrocities. Where one morning, people were killed in their beds. Men, women, and children. Amici in central Bosnia, close to Vitez. This was Croat paramilitaries. And of course, we all know Prijedor and Srebrenica. 8,000 people. And Visegrad. And many massacres. Today, for the last 20 years, 25 years, Bosnians live next to each other. There are mosques all over Republika Srpska. There are 240,000 non-Serbs living in the Republika Srpska. Europe must help Bosnia to also develop economically, be integrated, to consolidate this success. Instead, we are telling the Bosnians, no, we don't even open accession talks with you. We let you outside. And then we are surprised the nationalists are coming back. It's not a charity for the European Union to embrace the Balkan countries. It's in our interest. And really, honestly, the societies in the Balkans deserve a serious European policy that would help all of Europe to send a signal to the world that the kind of diversity we have, is not an obstacle to development. But isolation doesn't work. I give you one more example. Borders. Why are we not offering every Balkan country to join Schengen? You're surrounded by the EU. Instead, the European Union comes to you and says, you need to stop migrants. But that's stupid. The migrants who come to North Macedonia or Serbia first have to cross Bulgaria and Greece. You should get together and say, we all want to be in Schengen. You will not stop migrants here. And we want our borders to be like the border between Germany and Switzerland, which is not visible. There's no control. Germany and Poland. Northern Ireland and Ireland. We want invisible borders.
Yes.
So these ideas for the next 5 years, and then by 2030, you should all be in the single market. You should all be in Schengen. You should all be twice as wealthy because of the development that this will bring. And then you will also be able to join the European Union. And that's that's the best vision for the future.
If the government, this one or the next one, finds the courage to implement your suggestions, do you think that the European Union, member states and Brussels, the European Commission will agree so easily to accept us in the...
No, not easily, but I do remember Bulgaria 1996. Bulgaria in 1996, there were lots of European leaders who said Bulgarians are not Europeans. They are Orthodox. Remember, there was a former French president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, yes. A former German chancellor, Helmut Schmidt, a social democrat, who said Orthodox are not Europeans. And the Bulgarians didn't care. At that time, civil society in Sofia, I met all these people when I lived there, and politicians. They just said, no, we're just going to apply. We're just going to pressure. We're just going to really but they were also lucky. They were part of a bigger group. And then the opportunity came. The opportunity came with the Kosovo War, 1999. And then the Germans and the French were scared by having to fight a war in the middle of Europe, in 1999 with Serbia. And so they then said, okay, let's enlarge to everyone. And so they enlarged with everyone who was in line. Unfortunately, the Balkan countries were not in line. So they said, we talk with 12 countries. Everybody was in line. Malta, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania, all the Baltics. But the trouble was because North Macedonia had not applied earlier. It was not in line. That was the tragedy. Now we have another war in Europe, and we need another policy like this. And what I'm pushing for is that the European Union says all the Balkan countries and Romania and Moldova and Ukraine and Georgia, if it meets the conditions, all of them should be now part of the single market in the next 5 years if they meet the conditions. Another big push for peace and stability. And the Bulgarians in 96, 97 just pushed. They went everywhere. They were making presentations. I remember I organized this in Vienna. A group of high-level Bulgarians, intellectuals, politicians coming to Vienna to the diplomatic academy. You know what? Nobody came to listen to them. Nobody was interested. But they didn't give up. They just kept pushing. And when the moment came, they were there. Now, I think this is what we need for the next 2 years. And you work together with others in the Balkans, you work together with the Albanians and the Montenegrins, you're all together in NATO already. You just push and you work together with your friends, but you have a target, a credible, realistic strategy. And then there will be people around Europe who hopefully can help, and it's the best for everyone.
What about the Europe moving in let's say right direction? We have the possible new Holland Prime Minister Wilders, who has sent a message to Turkey, which is okay, long time ago, not really on the path towards EU. But obviously he's not going to accept, if he became Prime Minister, new members from the Balkans. Even though we are only, altogether, Balkans is approximately 20 million people.
Yeah.
What about these obstacles? Can we count on them?
Well, he's not yet Prime Minister, and I hope he will not be Prime Minister. I go to the Netherlands on Friday and Saturday. I'll talk to friends there. Some are in politics. It's not clear he can get a coalition. I very much hope that the other parties realize that a pro-Putin, anti-EU, anti-Muslim, anti-enlargement demagogue like Wilders would be very bad for the Netherlands. But in the Netherlands, the parliament, they have many parties. He has a quarter of the votes. He's not half the votes. He's a quarter of the votes. And if the other parties get together, they can form a government, and I very much hope so. We have a battle all over Europe. It's a battle to defend the peace that is unprecedented in Western Europe from 1950 until today. That was extended with enlargement to all of Central Europe. It's unprecedented to have so many years of no revolutions and no coups and no wars. We need to defend this in Germany, in France, everywhere. It's under assault. Putin is trying to help. He has his allies, the far right and the extreme left. He supports them. He wants to destroy the democratic Europe. And we need to show that we are stronger. It's a battle everywhere. When we talk about, but there are battles that are depending on how we fight them. In Poland, there is a new government that is going to be pro-European, very likely. That's good. In Germany, there'll be a big battle in elections, European Parliament elections, local elections next year against the far right. It's not just in North Macedonia that you have political problems. We have them all over Europe. We're all fighting the same battle. But let's know what we are fighting about. Fighting for. We are fighting for a vision that is given now the generation of my father, who was born in 1943. When he was 2 years old, the Second World War ended. Since then, he's lived in peace. And I have grown up in peace, and I want my daughters and grandchildren to grow up in peace. And that is possible if we defend European integration, if we defend NATO, if we defend human rights. And we need to bring all the democracies in Europe into this. That's the battle for the next 5 years.
Yeah, that sounds very good. And thank you for good words. But in reality, let's be honest, all of the countries in the Western Balkans are facing extremely high level of corruption. As we can see in the last American blacklist and the progress report of the EU, for Macedonia, there was a line that there was no improvement in anti-corruption fight whatsoever. So there was no progress at all. And many of the foreigners in Macedonia would say, oh, this is not our task. It's your task to fight the corruption. But we cannot obviously fight corruption without the assistance of EU. And if we are not in EU itself, if we are only part of the open market of EU, I don't think that corruption will...
No, there's a misunderstanding. To join the single market, you need to have the rule of law. There needs to be a credible rule of law. There need to be procurement legislation and implemented. So it's more or less like joining the EU, except you're not in the institutions on the table. You're like Norway, but you need to have the rule of law. Otherwise, you can't join the single market. But on corruption, countries can change for the better and for the worst. There is. I have no doubt at all that if the Macedonians who believe in honest government, but who've left the country to work elsewhere because they're frustrated, or who've left politics because they're frustrated, There's not a high salary. And if you're an honest politician, you don't earn much money. It's very frustrating. And then you're isolated in Europe. That's not fun. But if you have a credible national project of bringing Macedonia into the European Union, I think a lot of people might even go back into government, get back into the administration. And we've seen in Romania, my favorite example is Romania. This country was famous for corruption in the 1990s. When Romania became a candidate in 2000, in 99, decision to open accession talks. Accession talks start in February 2000. That year, the two politicians who were fighting for president of Romania, one was Iliescu, a former member of the Politburo of Ceausescu, like a really old communist. And the other one was Tudor, a radical chauvinist nationalist, a fascist, basically. Those were the two leaders fighting for the presidency in the year in which Romania opened accession talks. And the prime minister, I think, is by now in jail for corruption. He was also an ex-communist. But Romania has changed since 2000. There are more mayors, more prime ministers, more ministers in jail in Romania for corruption than in many Western countries. And Romania has developed economically fabulously. Definitely. Now, is Romania a perfect country? No, but France is no perfect country. Italy is no perfect country. Austria is no perfect country. But countries change, right?
That's hopeful. We have only 1.5 minutes approximately. So I'm worried that even if we cancel the EU membership, full membership, even if we apply only, on short term, mid-term, only on European market membership, I'm afraid that we are not going to be accepted due to corruption and other issues. And then the frustrations will be so big that some people will start to think about other paths. I don't know.
Yeah, well, of course. And all these other paths will lead straight back. They will lead the Balkans back into the other Europe, the Europe of the Caucasus, the Europe of Ukraine, the Europe of Belarus, right? So that's obviously dangerous, and it won't work, and it would be a disaster. But on corruption, I would never accept the idea that any countries or societies are inherently, genetically, culturally corrupt. That makes no sense. Germany after World War II, when there was a black market and the whole country was destroyed, was totally corrupt. And then you build up institutions again. Any society can change. But you need to have a vision, being in a community with other countries that are imperfect, but democracies, helps to stabilize yourself. And I think this is what's great about European integration. So I would never give up on this vision. It's just we need to be realistic. There's no point believing the hollow rhetoric. German politicians say for the last 3 years we want to accelerate integration. But it's not happening because the model is wrong.
So we are talking about corruption, problems domestically with our economy, problems in neighborhood relations with some countries. Even generally, the situation in Western Balkans, it's much better. About the open Balkan. We can travel among our states with only personal IDs. But still, the possibility for worsening the situation in security terms, it's present. When we talk about right radicals in EU, you can imagine how much more feasible this is in the region. So I have a feeling, it's about the feeling that the EU it's not anymore interested in what's going on in the region involving Ukraine and Moldova as well, because for us it's not understandable how can EU absorbate Ukraine and Moldova and us. We're talking about more than 70 million people. There are many issues that are not clear. And the behavior of the Brussels and some member states, it's really confusing for us. We get mixed messages, let's say.
Yes, and that's not because that's true. That is the reality. It's a fight, but the stakes are enormous. I mean, we've had this unprecedented period of peace in Western Europe, extending to Eastern and to Central Europe and parts of Southeast Europe. We need to complete this. It's in the interest of the Balkans that the far right enemies of the EU don't win in Europe. It's in the interest of European Democrats and centrists and liberals that the far right doesn't return and wreak havoc and destruction anywhere in the Balkans or in the neighborhood. So it's a common interest, it's a common fight. And if one wants to win it, the key is not to just believe in lofty words, rhetoric. The key is to be very strategic, how to use your limited time, your limited focus to achieve breakthroughs. That is why I find it so frustrating that so much effort is wasted sometimes for 5 years, for 10 years, because the strategy is wrong. Because we have a serious fight, we need to use our allies, our intelligence, our time to fight battles that matter. And at this moment, the battle that matters is to convince the European Union that it has a massive self-interest to integrate the Balkans, and to convince leaders in the Balkans, in civil society and in politics, how to make the case practically about integration that can lead to results. Results in the next 2 years, not in the next 20. It's hard, it's possible, it's worked before, but it can fail.
Do you see any strategy by Brussels in terms of vetoes in case your suggestion is not accepted by Brussels and the countries candidates to switch from full membership to European open market? How do you think that the countries can move forward without making harms inside the region? I know it's a complicated question, but
no, I understand. I mean, the veto is look. The European Union was created by realists, and they realized that the key is interests. There are interests. So if we want to get, let's say, Austria, Hungary, Slovenia, Slovakia, countries that care more about the Balkans than about Ukraine, honestly, if you want to get them to support Ukraine, you accelerate the integration in the Balkans. On the contrary, it's good for the Balkans that countries like the Baltic states, Poland, the Nordics, Sweden, Finland, want to integrate Ukraine. And so you make a package. You say it's good for everyone if everyone makes progress. That has been my recommendation the last few days. I mean, I'm calling ministers in different governments and say, listen, the way to deal with a veto against Ukraine is not to accept it and say, oh my God, what do we do? It's to say, listen, can we make an offer to the Balkans and to Ukraine? For example, access to the single market for all of them. And then really Austria or Hungary will veto it? If it's good for Serbia and Bosnia as well? Then they have an interest. Their businesses have an interest. So I think we should stop being naive. We shouldn't stop being idealistic, because the ideals that motivate us are the right ones. But we should stop being naive about achieving things without considering the interests.
Yeah, and the final question, what about the debate over the providers and beneficiaries? Many member states would, of course, be concerned about the entrance of 70 million, approximately, I don't know, Ukraine now, it's, 30 million, perhaps Moldova, Balkans, let's say 55, 60 million people. The whole system of budgeting in EU will collapse. At least 7 countries from beneficiaries will become providers. So how will this affect the whole process?
Well, I mean, again, let's look at interests. I mean, the union started with 6 members and it went to 28 when one left, 27. And the one that left has done very badly, outside of the union. There was just a report this week on the real problems of the UK economy. I mean, it's been performing very badly outside of the single market. But the union has changed, and of course it will change again. But the interest, what is the interest? That at a time when it's increasingly uncertain how globalization will survive, German investments in China really depend on peace between China and the US forever. German investments in Russia are lost, all of them. So if you can invest in countries that are closer to you, that are stable because they are integrated, that are part of the single market, Ukraine is a massive economic benefit to the European Union. I mean, it's one of the biggest grain and agricultural producers, as we saw, in the world. It has massive resources, but it has also a very smart people. It has one of the most motivated and experienced armies. I mean, the IT, the information technology, the internet administration is in Ukraine is better than in Germany. These are countries that would contribute something. And the same is true in the Balkans. If these 6 countries would develop just like Romania, and of course that's completely realistic. I mean, who believes in Skopje that you couldn't develop the way Romania has developed the last 20 years? I mean, this is a benefit to Greece and Italy and Germany and Austria. So it's not charity. The European Union has made all the countries that are in it richer than they were ever in their history. It's not based on idealism. You don't need saints as politicians who say, "Oh, I sacrificed my career and my wealth." No, that wouldn't work. Then we wouldn't have a European Union. But we need to be smarter about using interests.
Okay, so to wrap up, if you allow me, that means that we should convince our leaders to make step back, to start fight for the European single market, and then while in the market, with having benefits for the citizens, to fight for full membership, if I understand.
Yes. You don't give up full membership. You say that this is your goal now and in the future. But you say, one thing we want immediately is treat us fairly if you want to join the single market. All of us. And then, the vision is that the border between Kosovo and Serbia, in 5 years, you will not see the border. Both of them will be in the single market. Both of them will be in Schengen. And when you live as a Serb in Mitrovica, it's like living as an Irish Catholic in Derry, in the Republic of Ireland, in Northern Ireland. You don't live in the Republic of Ireland, but there's no border. The vision should be that this region, like in Yugoslav days, only this time it's all democracies, there should be no borders. And then you don't need to change the borders. And there should be investment, and it should be as easy to travel and trade and invest in North Macedonia as it is now in Timișoara or Bucharest or Vilnius or Warsaw. That's the vision. And that's reachable in the next 5 years with the right effort.
Thank you so much. Gerald Knaus of European Stability Initiative for Alpha Television interview. Благодарност уште еднашка за господинот Кнаус, кој што мислам дека даде добра оценка и добра анализа на тоа што се случува околу Европската унија и проширувањето на Европската унија, се разбира позицијата на Македонија во тој контекст. Благодарам што бевте и со нас вечерва. Останете живи и здрави и повторно се гледаме во текот на наредните денови. Пријатно.